a presentation. I know that on our last session, many of you had a series of questions. Those questions also led to a series of requests, and we're going to hear about all of those things on this morning. And so, with that, Ms. Dowse, if you'll proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor Davis and Augusta Commissioners. While this is our third work session, we did not receive any questions from you all, so we took the notes as well as the commentary from our last meeting and incorporated that into the presentation as well as the amendments that we will be discussing today. I have forwarded an electronic version of this presentation as well as each of you have a hard copy available in front of you. Today's agenda will surround new programming as well as new personnel. While this information is already contained in your budget book, I'll be giving you some high-level changes and I'll be giving you some high-level changes as well as ensuring that you are aware of key elements of this proposed budget. We will revisit some budget amendments as well as some new amendments that have come into my office since we met last week. I'll go over with you my proposed funding plan in conjunction with my team, as well as revisit our FY23 remaining budget calendar. The proposed new programming, we've already went over some of those details, but one of the commissioners wanted a little bit more information as to how much those various programs would be proposed as from a funding standpoint. While this information is in your book, I did highlight the Supply to Comply two-shed program at about $50,000, and then the right-of-way maintenance, as we discussed in depth on last week, to the tune of $500,000. New personnel includes not only the grant writer that will be reporting to the administrator in the administrator's office, but also some positions that arrived from a result of the disparity study recommendations, as well as the deputy coroner. As you know, the coroner's office has been pretty busy, unfortunately, and so this need was justified, as well as some additional positions within the procurement department to include a procurement technician, and then to offer the Human Resources Department some support surrounding training and compensation. This does not include a listing of those positions that the fire department will need. That information is contained in your budget book behind tab 5. These budget amendments you've already seen. I did send you documentation or an amended request, a further amended request from the District Attorney, Jared Williams. His request has decreased to $120,000. After speaking with him, his need was to increase his existing salaries for 12 employees and then ensure that he's able to offer a competitive package when the time comes. You've already seen the Serenity Mental Health as well as the other requests. The three on this page are additional requests that came into the office last week. The first is $150,000 for Mock Academy, and then $93,000 to include salary and benefits from the public defender. Their original request was not proposed in the administrator's proposed budget. However, because there was much talk and conversation surrounding it during the last work session, it has been added here. And then there was also interest from this body to increase the Augusta Public Library system from the $200,000 that was recommended in the proposed budget to include their full ask of $300,000, which is an additional amount of funds to total $100,000. Now, of that listing, I want to make sure I point out that listing does not include the approximately $100,000 needed for state court. Of the list, it totals $382,000. In order to fund that, I would propose deferring the start date for new positions to April 1st. That will get us about $340,000. Also, removing the salary increase that was originally proposed, that would total a little more than $14,000. And that change came simply because the budget and the recommendations were already placed into the budget prior to the approval of the retention plan Plan 1 and Plan 2. So what the consultant requested an increase for, that's already been covered. And then the additional dollars, a little more than $20,000, will be covered just from miscellaneous adjustments throughout the budget, nothing mainly impactful. The budget calendar is slowly but surely winding down, with November 15th next week being the proposed date for adoption. And then, of course, when adopted, January 1st will be the effective budget date. Myself, as well as my team, is available for any questions that you may have regarding any changes we are proposing.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Commissioner from the 7th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Madam Administrator, appreciate this. Can we go back to slide 4, the FY new personnel? Are all positions within each one of these departments full, instead of like reallocating resources of positions that might be open and redirecting funds? Like, are every one of these departments where these positions, are they fully staffed?
I cannot speak for every department, but a safe thought would be probably not.
Okay. Yeah, because I guess my concern is that, we're talking about pushing it to the second quarter, but then when we come back and have this conversation next year, we're going to be even more in each department, increased budgets, that sort of thing. I mean, we still have not talked about cutting anything. So that's kind of why I think we have to have a deeper dive conversation in that area, because I bet these departments, we could find some money somewhere within there to help alleviate some of that, to maybe we don't have to wait until the second quarter on the hiring. Your $382,000 proposed funding plan, does that include the last 3 here, Mock, Public Defender, Public Library?
It does.
Okay.
Now, I will say the Parks and Recreation, $150,000 for Mock Academy, those dollars we're proposing to take them from their existing budget. Historically, they have had a surplus, and so we will work with the department director to ensure that we're able to fund that program.
Okay, that's a little concerning for me to hear that, because if we're having surpluses and we have needs, and then we have a bunch of positions where we can't fill within that department, I guess, so that would be within Parks and Rec budget. All right, let me write that down. I saw in the budget here, based on like Augusta Mini Theater, we never funded them, but we're going to fund them for $50,000. I saw the DDA, we increased them by significant amounts of money. Like, again, when we're short and we're not having those conversations of, maybe, and even the library, like, I'm not, as I sit here and I look at what we need and like the positions thing, I think we have some definite needs that from a grant writer standpoint that would help us bring in some money, where maybe waiting to the second quarter isn't the answer. But like, if the library, if we cut it to 50, and then, some of these other areas that I've mentioned where we don't necessarily give them everything they want, but have the discussions of what we I'm sorry?
Excuse me, they were giving me some notes.
Oh, okay.
I'll wait till you finish.
Yeah. So I guess I hate to do line by line, but in the same respect, like when we're talking about $382,000 and we've got, the ones I just mentioned that we basically, I don't know who made the decision, but obviously your office or whoever made the decision to go ahead and grant some of these. My issue with it is that when we grant them this year, it's almost like they're grandfathered in, and like when we have this conversation next year, it's going to be 10 times harder to sit up here with no ARP funds to allocate. So I think that like we need to look at it holistically, and not just this year, when we're sitting up here granting these funds, realizing that I think you might have sent an email that's saying there's a $9 million deficit when the ARP funds are gone that we're going to have to find within the, I mean, it's going to be tougher conversations in a year from now if we don't have these conversations now.
Commissioner,
Go ahead.
Let me interject for just one moment. I want to remind everyone that this is the paper exercise. Nobody's been granted anything. That's why you're asking these thoughtful questions to decide whether that moves forward. Okay? No one's received anything. These are requests that have been made, and this is a budget discussion. It's fluid in nature, and until this commission adopts it, it's a conversation. Continue.
I appreciate it. I think that's the reason that, like, when we sit up here and we talked about last time, a lot of these departments that have increased budgets, some of it IT, some of it's personnel, but like when they're not fully staffed and we're sitting here giving them the excess, but they're still not fully staffed, it just, in my mind, doesn't really make a lot of sense. Because we know those positions are not going to be fully staffed by the start of the year. I just think that for me, we need to go find $382,000 and not wait on the positions, because I think like I said, like if we don't cut and we just wait on the positions, we're putting ourselves in a bigger hole next year, and the hole's getting to get bigger. We know that with the ARP fund. So I just hope that we can have a deeper dive conversation over the next week or so. My last question is, when we publish the adoption of the budget, can we make any changes after that, or is that what it is once we publish it?
You can.
Yes.
Okay. Because I don't think we're going to be ready for this adoption budget, by tomorrow. Post it the way it is for sure. So thank you.
Yeah. So I want to go back to your comments and questions, Commissioner. The deeper dive needs to happen now, not tomorrow or 2 days, but we'll spend as much time as we need to today. And if that requires us going to departmental budgets and looking at them from a line perspective, then we're here to do just that. That's why we're here. So what I would pivot is to ask you to identify those things you want to lean into, and we'll work to resolve them on today. I'm going to go down the list of folks who want to speak, and I want to highlight, amplify, elevate the conversation around future budgets, particularly with regards to funding sources that will go away. Okay.
Mayor Davis, before you go down, can I respond to some of Commissioner Franklin's
I'm going to
comments?
give you an opportunity to. I just want to make sure that everyone on this dais has that at the forefront of your mind, along with basic service delivery. I'm going to sound like a broken record on rewind. Service delivery is where we started. What are the core services we have to deliver? How do we fully fund them, and how do we deliver them? Ms. Dowse.
So a couple of the things the commissioner said I wanted to speak to. One, we did not grant, or it was not recommended in this proposed budget for the mini theater to receive any funding. You may note that they requested funding. However, it was not included in this proposed budget. And that's behind tab 6. And then the second thing, you mentioned the amount of vacancies, and you stated that we have not addressed that. I did communicate to this body as well, verbally and through my transmittal letter, that positions that have been vacant for more than 2 years were proposed to be abolished in support of the additional personnel changes that have been proposed here.
Can I respond? Tab 4, page 6 says that you gave the mini theater $50,000, 2023 administrator recommendation. Tab 4, page 6.
Okay. They're telling me that that was an error and that has been fixed.
Can we get the updated then? I mean, obviously our book's not right. I mean,
Are there any other updates we don't know?
yeah.
Okay.
If you look behind tab 6, there is a agency request spreadsheet in which that document shows that the Augusta Mini Theater requested $50,000. And if you look off to the far right column, those dollars were not included in the proposed budget.
Historically, that document, the agency one, is the one of record that we've always relied on. If it shows up in another place, again, I would offer that it probably is an oversight, a misprint, but the agency document is what we have historically relied on as long as I've been here. And 5 is the number of grace. Ms. Dowse?
That's
All right.
it, just those two. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you. Commissioner from the 6th, then the 8th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Dowse, you just made mention about the positions, but if my memory serves me correct, that was a total of 8 positions, that, all right? Or was it more than that? But the 2 year, you said it had been vacant for 2 years,
It ended up totaling 6.
and of the total of 6 throughout the whole organization?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. All right, but I just wanted to know that you did, it was a minimum number. What I want right now, Madam Administrator, and that's to go back once again and define what you're proposing for the end of the first quarter of next year out of these budget amendments here. Which programs are that again? To take place in April. Which ones are you proposing?
Oh, all of the positions that are being requested for approval behind tab 5. Please note that there are several court positions that are slated to not begin until July. But all others, we will not fund until April 1st.
Behind tab 5, okay, you got us running back and forth. Okay.
Well, tab 5 gives you a comprehensive listing of the personnel.
All right, okay. Because I was assuming it was referring to what you got here on this budget amendment, that some of you were saying, okay, I'm recommending that you fund it the 1st of April, and now you're telling me to look at tab 5. And, so,
Well, tab 5 just gives you the details,
okay,
but the $344,000 would come as a result of deferring the start date for those positions to April 1st.
okay, so let me do it from what you passed out this morning to me, and I'm gonna go by item, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind.
Commissioner Son, let me ask you this, if you
Yes,
don't
sir.
mind. Ms. Dowse, would you walk us through tab 5
Sure.
in its entirety?
Sure. Tab 5 is a listing of all personnel that has been requested as well as what has been recommended for approval. Everything highlighted in blue has been recommended by the administrator for approval. Of those positions, the end of page 3 offers you a total of almost $1.7 million. If we defer the start of most of those positions, with the exception of the judicial positions in Superior Court and in Circuit Court, as well as RCCI and the Compliance Department Director increase, if we defer those till April 1st, that will provide us with about $340,000 to go towards the need of amendments that this body has communicated that you're interested in funding.
But I'll be honest with you, Ms. Dowse, I don't mean to sound, I thought you told a few minutes ago that you was gonna move away from the $14,000 for the compliance director because of it already been addressed. And now you're saying push it to April?
No.
Am I missing something?
No, I included that position in the decrease, so that would not be funded.
Okay, well, yeah, okay. I'm still confused, Mr. Mayor. I'll leave it alone for now.
Well, I don't want us to be confused. I want to go back to the core components here. And one of the challenges that is clear is that there's an approach to try to take one-offs. What would have been better is that you given, and it's a chronic thing, if you had given opportunity to go through the tabs and then explain here is where the tab is applied at in the request or budget amendments. So you're going to ask a series of questions, and I would take you to the tab first, and then ask you to base your question off of that.
Well, let me say one of my questions really is because I know the district attorney, you know, there's some graduating students that he's trying to, you know, get the first part of the year. I've already been in communication with them, and so you're gonna lose an opportunity to fill some of those positions that he has available there. So that's why, if that was a part of this conversation, I
No.
just naturally assume, and I, you know, so you know, we know what the letters are assumed, so I take full responsibility for that.
Well,
First,
as I always say, assumption is the lowest form of living. So let's bring it up a little higher.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And
That's dressing it up, Mr. Mayor, putting a tuck on it.
Well, but it's true. It's always the lowest form of living.
Right.
The reality of it is, you've got a decision to make. What's being proposed is, and it's really smoothing the financial curve.
Yeah,
Waiting until April to onboard these people. You've done all of that processing, all of these things. And so what you're saying is you're effectively going to not expend 25% of the resources of a full year. Okay, but you're going to go ahead and do the posting, the interviewing, and all of these things, and then you'll get the person here. That's part one. But number two, there are other thoughtful ways, as I was sharing with the administrator this morning, that if these are real positions and the people are really needed, then let's look for other ways to bring people on. I mean, the last thing I'd want is to need somebody to work in the office, and now I can't get them here until April, even though I've got other resources that might be able to help that. So look at it holistically, okay?
Mayor Davis, I would like to clarify Commissioner Hassan's statement. The $120,000 that the district attorney has amended his request to need would be included in the $382,000 and hence would be funded for the entire year.
okay, that's all I was asking about, what positions that from this thing, this, if you'd have outlined those for me and not had to go back to 5, we would have known exactly what you was talking about, but it's sending us back and forth. And I thought, based on you had the commentary here on the back page, that what those needed $382,000 would have been appropriate to say, okay, here's what you needed for, the $344,000 that you're going to defer, that would have been outlined on the very same sheet, and that would have been simple as for me, because it doesn't say here, go to tab 5 as a reference point.
Well, and specifically speaking concerning the district attorney, his positions were never recommended in the proposed budget.
I get that.
Okay.
I get that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No, thank you, sir. All right, Commissioner from the 8th, and then it's the lady from the 9th.
Thank you, Mayor. This question is for the administrator, of course. So, in discussing this $382,000 that's needed, you know, we're looking through quite a few different things here. You know, of course, the big one that sticks out to me is the $150,000 for Mock Academy. Why is this the first time that we've heard about this request?
My office received the budget amendment on, I want to say maybe Thursday or Friday. The department realized that it was excluded in error
Do we know what this will be for?
for their continued programming activities at both Diamond Lakes and Fleming Tennis Center.
And is the 150 consistent with what they've recently received?
Yes.
And the 382, when you go to the slide before you start talking about the additional positions, you're talking about $500,000 to streamline right-of-way maintenance. Where is that money coming from?
It's part of what has been proposed to be funded through the existing budget.
So is money being transferred out of Parks and Rec?
Not at this time, no.
So how
If
is
you
that-
remember, Commissioner from the 8th, we had a broad conversation about that on last week, that these dollars currently reside in existing budgets.
Yep. No, I understand that. I'm just making sure that, you know, as we're talking about moving money and moving programming to different departments, I think that it would make a lot more sense to go ahead and allocate that money within the budget now instead of leaving it in the department with the understanding that, you know, this program's going to be streamlined later on. I think we saw a lot of that when we were talking about the usage of the ARP funds for cleaning up that no plan was really ever implemented. And we ended up being able to reallocate that into some of the departments earlier this year. So I guess just the biggest concern that I have here is the money staying in the departments, and even Parks and Rec's budget has increased by $700 and something thousand. So I'm just trying to understand, will that $500,000 cover what is needed for the right-of-way maintenance?
So the money is not staying in Parks and Recreation's budget. This will be funding that would eventually go to Engineering and Environmental Services, who would be taking care of the right-of-way maintenance and medians. So this is not Parks and Recreation's money. These dollars were estimated prior to bids being returned to complete those services. These are services that Parks and Recreation does today, that in an effort to streamline, we talked just last week about the commissioners not knowing who to call for what. There's a lot of overlap in who does what. And so these dollars are earmarked for the contract that will expand to take care of those medians and right-of-ways for engineering.
And the question is 500,000 enough?
It may not be, but as I stated just last week, if it's not, then we will look into the Parks and Recreation's budget as those duties and responsibilities are being transferred from them to engineering.
And I guess my question, what I'm trying to get to, how much does Parks and Rec currently spend on right-of-way maintenance?
I can't answer that right now. But I do know majority of their right-of-way maintenance and median maintenance is in-house services.
And I understand that, and the question goes, once that work is taken off of them, what will those employees be doing?
They would then turn their attention to our parks and recreation facilities, of which have been what this body would consider to be not our best.
Commissioner from the 8th, can you go back to your question, because it's the right one? Where's the data on what we've spent over the last 4 years from Parks and Recs on right-of-way maintenance? And then the same holds true for Augusta Engineering.
Correct.
That's how we can make a better decision. Okay?
Is there a place where we can find any of that data?
I can get it to you. I'm making a note. We can get it to you.
And is there a way that we can get the updated forms for our books before we leave today, since the numbers in here aren't right?
That was just one page, but we'll be more than happy to get you that information. Where did my pen go?
And let's see. Going back to Commissioner from the 6th, I think where he was trying to head with the new personnel, is there not a way to use the existing open positions to fund these new personnel needs?
Sure. If the commission tells me if they want to decrease the vacancy time frame, then we could definitely do that. My proposal included positions that were vacant for more than 2 years. There were a couple of those outliers that were removed from that listing. But if the commission says, hey, any position that's been vacant for 18 months or for more than 12 months, you want those positions abolished, absent what's in a elected official's office, then we can bring you back what that will yield from a funding standpoint.
Do you have an idea of how many positions have been open for 18 months?
If you give me maybe 5 or 10 minutes, we can get that information for you, because I do have it.
I think that'd be helpful in helping us make a decision.
So let's do this, Ms. Dowse. Let's keep going. You got a great team there. They can get that information. And before we get to the point of moving on and closing this out, we'll come back to it.
Okay.
They should be on there.
Everybody's got a fresh mind today. All right, I'm going to the commissioner from the 4th.
Oh, Commissioner Scott? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We're going to come back to him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good morning, Madam Administrator.
Good morning.
A couple of things that got a couple of questions. Number one, in this proposed new personnel, I guess I'm looking at these positions, and first thing that comes to my mind is the purpose and then the outcome. What is it that we expect to achieve by having these positions that we haven't already done or can't do currently? Now, in specific, this grant writer for the administrator's office, can you expand on that a little bit in terms of that purpose and the outcome, what we expect to have as a result of having that person in the office?
Sure. So the city of Augusta does not have someone such as a grant writer that could spend 100% of their time being intentional about sourcing funding for Augusta's needs. Various departments have personnel that have written grants in the past. However, because that is not their primary job duty or responsibility, we oftentimes miss out on possibly hundreds of millions of dollars in grant funding. Augusta has been the recipient of millions of dollars of grant funding in the past, but this particular position would ensure that Augusta's needs are heard on a global perspective surrounding our funding opportunities that we are available for. This position would work in conjunction with all of our departments to obtain the information and ensure that when notice of funding opportunities are available, we know on the front end versus a week before the grant opportunity is due. And then we may miss it. We may not have a complete application. And so I am expecting this position to more than pay for itself, as well as provide additional funding to a budget that will need it.
Okay, and is this something that other communities have in their administrator's office, say Savannah, Macon, other areas as such?
Sure. My research has shown that a grant writer has resided in many different places. So I'm open to where this body would like for this position to be placed. I felt that from an administrative standpoint, being able to assist all of the departments and from a holistic standpoint, then it being funneled in specialized areas would be of value to this government.
Commissioner from the fourth, can I interject for a moment?
Yes, sir.
The position is needed. It's long overdue. I'm gonna sound like the broken record again. We've been talking about it for 8 years. And when you look at the number of grants and the budget opportunities that have come from this administration, from the Biden-Harris administration, I believe just a couple of weeks ago I shared with Deputy Administrator Jackson a series of requests that I had gotten from the White House and our partners in the federal government. If you don't have somebody who's spending time all the time on this, those dollars go to other communities. There's a series of EV charging grants right there, but you got to be able to move expeditiously, whether it's Atlanta, Savannah, and I know Lester Miller over in Macon. He's being pretty innovative and doing these things. Where the person sits, I don't particularly care, but this person needs to work holistically across the government, and it doesn't need to be relegated to working with departments, but the incoming mayor's office needs to have immediate and direct access to whoever this person is, because they're going to be working very closely with the administration as well. What I would ask this body is to not wait until April 1st as being recommended by the interim administrator. This person needs to be brought in at the top of the year. The floor continues. Continue, sir.
Sure, and this is one of the reasons why I just asked a question in reference to what other entities were doing that, because if there's some research and information available out there that clearly shows not only a need but the purpose and for what we can receive as a result of that, I'm sure as it's been put, it would pay for itself. But I just wanted to see what else was out there. Like I said, I don't really care who's, where they sit. I was more interested in the actual need and what we would receive, what we possibly could receive, as a result of having that person in place that we're currently unable to do at this particular time. So I think that's important when we're making these types of decisions. If there's that information out there, just looking forward to seeing, what type of benefits was brought to other communities as a result of having this. So it makes our job a heck of a lot easier in terms of our decision making when we're doing this sort of thing.
Commissioner from the 4th, let me say it this way. Were it not for two very active U.S. senators that we now have, some of the grant dollars that we've gotten over the last year and a half, 2 years, they would have continued to flow away from Augusta had we had a grant writer in place to help us and help augment and bolster that. We'd be a whole lot better off.
Well, then I guess I'm happy and disappointed at the same time that it hadn't been done in the previous 8 years. I'm not going to get a whole lot into that, but I mean, clearly, if there was that need there, certainly I would think this body would have had the wherewithal to make that happen. A little disappointed that that didn't happen before now. Looks like we're going to be able to do it at this particular time. I think I brought it up last week about the confusion in terms of who to call and that sort of thing. So I think what I'm going to do, and I don't know about anybody else, but I think I'm just going to call you. And if I call you, then we can get to whoever it is that need to get to, because calling this one and that one and saying call over here or call over there. But if I just call the administrator, how about that? That would probably get me to where I need to be so I can get the answers that I need to have. How about that? Is that okay?
That's fine.
All right, fantastic. Thank you.
In the words of Erykah Badu, call Tyrone.
He don't even have a phone.
Well, the next song says, I can make you put your phone down.
Oh, God, watch out now.
Chair recognizes the commissioner from the 10th.
Thank you,
And you
Mr.
all
Mayor.
thought that I didn't know how to joke and cut up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Dowse, going back to the fundings for the positions, the cemetery maintenance program is going to be transferred from Parks and Recreation over to RCCI. Where will that funding and how much will that be? Where will it come from and how much will it be for the cemeteries?
So, Commissioner, the amount of funding will get you an amount, but the amount of funding will be transferred from it's the employees, the cemetery employees, what are they called? The work detail, the work detail crews and the supervisors are already paid by RCCI. And those are crews that are allocated to Parks and Recreation to clean the cemeteries. Those individuals would still clean the cemeteries. They just will not have the ability to do other things for Parks and Recreation. And so it's a wash because we've created a budget line item now for the cemeteries for RCCI in which they were already paid by RCCI.
Okay, so there's no actual funding for the cemeteries?
It's personnel because they already have the equipment and they already have the vans.
Okay, one other question. On tab 5, page 1, top of the line, it says implement compensation study includes benefits. Annual cost total $750,000. Is that going to be the cost of doing a compensation study?
No, sir. So the compensation study is on the commission agenda for approval by this body tomorrow. And the $750,000 is estimated funding that we have set aside for the compensation study to be implemented in phases. So the expectation is for the contractor to come in and be able to provide Augusta with a preliminary recommendation of what changes they would like for this body to make. And then the $750,000 can go towards those initial changes.
Wow. Okay, no other questions.
Madam Administrator, I'm going to make a request of you and your team. I'd like to get the following data sent to this body. The number of FTEs that have been allocated to cemetery maintenance and hours, which then translate into dollars for the previous 4 years. If I remember correctly, we have this work system where you're tracking not only labor, but you're tracking equipment, all of these things. And so if you could provide us with that data for cemetery maintenance, right-of-way maintenance, and by department, that would be helpful. So that as we're having these conversations, we're not just throwing a number up against the wall saying, well, based on how I feel and what the citizens have told me, I think we need to spend more money on cemetery maintenance, but I don't have any data that tells me what that should look like. I go back to my central premise, and that is our job is to make sure that we're delivering on city services as efficiently and as effectively as possible, and I can't do that based on how I feel. I need to know what I've spent in the past so that I can make a budgetary decision on what that should look like tomorrow. Okay?
Sure.
All right. If we can suspend for just a minute, stand at ease for just a minute. Okay, Administrator. All right, the Commissioner from the 7th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm going to go I got a lot to talk about, and I'll go as specific as I can, but mainly just want to add some questions to see. So I'm all on tab 4, just to let you know. Tab 4 going through line by line the expense budgets. The Board of Election, this year's election year, next year's not an election year, but their budget when it was non-election year was $200,000, $225,000 less. I guess I'm looking for money, and I guess as I go through each one of these, I hope that we would have the conversations with the department heads on, like, if they're asking for 10 people, maybe they only need 9, and we can take 30,000 here, 20,000, and get to this 382. Because I'm of the proponent that we ought to start this now, because I think we are leaving money, especially the grant writer. I think the grant writer is an important aspect. But each one of these, I'm just going to, why is it such an increase when it's a non-election year for the Board of Election? Was that question on that specific? And you might not have the answers. I understand that, and I respect that, but I'm just telling you kind of what I see.
Well, there's still elections that are happening next year, although, so for instance, the special election that's coming up, that's one, and it was a second one.
The December 20th you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, that's the only one for that one. But
Yeah.
I did want to go back, Commissioner. Also, you mentioned vacancies. I can't remember which one of you mentioned vacancies. This information is late September. There were 170 vacancies total. Of that number, only 41 were vacant for 1 to 2 years. 116 were vacant less than 1 year. This also speaks to our difficulty in retaining talent, hence the reason why we did the retention plan 2 and 3. This information, these numbers include elected officials as well as the sheriff's office. So we have not, it's general fund, but it does have elected officials in here. So it does not have the sheriff's office. Yeah. It does not have the sheriff's office, but the numbers that I just gave you do include some elected officials. But the majority of your vacancies comes within vacancies that have been vacant for less than 1 year, and that number was 116.
And again, the qualifier is these are general fund vacancies, okay?
Yeah.
That's correct.
And on page 1 again, the tax commissioner construction office. Can you explain to me what does construction office mean with its 165,000? It's constitutional office. What is the 165,000 increase? Is that just increase per? Is that part of like the salary?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You are going to see the effect in each one's budget from the full year for the 3% that was given in October the 7th of this year, plus the 3% that will be given January the 1st. So in departments that have a large portion of their budgets that are related to salary and wages, you are going to see a larger impact. That is, as I think I remember this question came up before, and we did look at the tax commissioner, that is the majority up in his salary and wages line item.
And that would be the same for the marshal's department probably as well?
I don't remember specifically if I looked up the marshal's department, but there is a good impact in there as well, as there is
Yeah.
across the board to a lot of departments that are more heavily weighted towards salaries rather than supply type line items.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, the marshal's department, 307,000 increase. It's pretty significant. I'm going to go back to the question I asked last week, hoping y'all have an answer. The Cyber Center parking deck, it went from 41,000 to 189, and I understand it's at the year, but did y'all find out why it went up so significantly?
Commissioner, that was a carryover from the prior year. We have received information from AU about their current year budget and projected budget, and we are able to reduce that to $100,000.
So it's now at 100?
It will be 100, yes. We will. That is a recommendation we're going to make.
Okay, so is that part of this three? Can we go down to 282 now, or, I mean,
It will offset revenue, so if that's what you plan, if that's what you would want to do, yes. What I proposed did not include that.
okay, well, all right. All right, well, we're making progress here. Okay, moving on to, we've already talked about that. Oh, the Fifth Street Bridge. I saw it in two different areas within this tab 4. I saw 50,000 at one part and then 150,000 at another. Was there a reason there was an additional 150,000 for that? And I'm going to try to find it, but
No, that was the 50,000. He said he found the additional 150.
yeah, I'll find it in a second. find it. I'll find it. Let me just keep going and I'll find it. Ezekiel.
Commissioner, can I stop you for
Sure.
one moment? If you go back to your Board of Elections comment, in looking at the Board of Elections, their expenses, their election expense went down $731,000.
Okay, I see what you're saying. But the department still went up 220 something based on an off-cycle election. I see what you're saying. Okay. All right. The Ezekiel house, we've always funded that, and now we're not. Like, what's the why? What happens with that? Tab 4, page 6, middle of the page.
Commissioner, if you refer to tab 6, we continue to fund the Ezekiel Harris House in the amount that's been consistent in the past with $50,900.
So this document's wrong.
So, okay, the staff is telling me that that was an error. It's on the same error. Tell them about the error.
Sorry, it's the same error. There's a flip. If you look on that same tab, you will see the mini theater and you will see Ezekiel Harris.
Is that it?
Those two were flipped. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. The summer youth employment recreation, is that under the recreation department? I mean, we're going from a zero budget to 130,000 in 3 years, and we've only spent seven. Like, what is that for? I guess
That's the summer employment for those various, is it various or is it one particular facility?
I think it's all across the recreation.
Yeah, it's all across Parks and Recreation. He's out.
is it because we're doing new programming, or is it because we're paying more, or like?
Parts of that is the increase in salaries.
The $15 per hour, where they were being paid $9. They were until the recent action, the move through the $15 per hour, they were being paid essentially minimum wage.
Okay.
You do see a big impact in that area.
It was the right thing to do.
I'm not saying it's not. Can you explain to me I'm on tab 4, page 24. The NSP grant project, the expenses of that are going back up, and like, explain to me why. Page 24, middle of the page. It's a grant project, but like, that's a significant increase.
Well, I'd have to ask Hawthorne.
Yeah.
Hawthorne, that's just the timing of the grant monies that come in.
But I guess my question is, we're getting a grant writer, does that help with that cost? Or is the grant writer not going to go into HCD?
They already have a grant writer.
These grants are already awarded. This budget reflects the grant activity of those grants that already are received, awarded through Housing and Neighborhood Development and all of Hawthorne's programs. This is the fund that accounts for all the HCD activity. So a grant writer is going to produce grant activity that you haven't seen in this budget because they haven't written and applied for those grants yet.
And not all grants are 100%. Some grants are 80-20, in which the city has to infuse funding to receive the 80%.
Okay. I'm going to skip the contingencies in all the departments. The Fifth Street, I found it. Tab 4, page 34. Again, maybe the document's wrong, but it says $150,000 for the Fifth Street Bridge in the middle of the page. Why would we get this?
34. Tab 4, page 34.
Might be down to 130,000 here shortly.
Okay, Commissioner, the $150,000 was to address some looming needs. For one, you know that there's a problem with parking. There's not ample parking in the area. You do know that we do not have a restroom in the area, as well as there is a building at the corner of Fifth Street that Augusta owns. And so those dollars, the $150,000, was earmarked with the plan to bring you back something more comprehensive that may include demolition of that building, bathrooms, additional parking, and so forth. So those dollars were proposed for that purpose.
Ms. Dowse,
Yes.
and the commissioner from the 7th, you still have the floor. We don't have a parking problem. I got a $1.2 million parking lot over there that's largely vacant. We don't have a parking problem. So I want to know how we're going to address that. I got a $1.2 million parking lot. That's camera ready. That's blue light emergency light ready. So I understand. There's a company down the street that, quote, is supposed to be using that, but we need to fix that. I'm just talking about what I'm talking about. But
In addition to parking, a bathroom,
Yeah.
and that's what those dollars were earmarked for. As you know, there is a building there on the corner that can be used for those purposes. Additional parking, I'll say.
Yeah. Well, for me, I mean, the marina has a bathroom. I mean, the building is real estate. I don't know. That might be another 150,000 for me. I'm just being real. I'm gonna keep moving. The DDA project for the James Brown. What is the funding? Where's that funds coming from for the 759? Keep going down the page. It's a DDOT. Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought. All right. I promise I'm got 2 questions left. The T Center asked for 1.645, and you have 1.75 on page 42, tab 4, and 670 is the actuals this year. Help me justify why we would want to go up on their recommend. You know what's there. Page 42, tab 4.
We receive those reports quarterly, and those expenses are recorded. So what the 670 that you see there is only half a year. We just received the third quarter. We'll be recording those expenditures shortly.
So what's the justification, though, not doing 1.645 and going up to 1.750, I guess is my question. If they're only going to do 1.3, maybe 1.4 this year. Looks like we got another 100,000 there.
Okay, but this is a self-contained, this is not general fund money. So I'm gonna ask that I can get back to you
Okay.
on that one, because it does not affect your expenditures in your general fund.
Okay. All right. And the last question I have is page 46, tab 4. The CVB and the Coliseum Authority, the expenditures are significantly increased on both. Justification, I mean, one of these facilities is closing for 6 months. Hotel motel tax is up. Like, what's the...
Okay, hotel motel tax. Augusta does not keep any of that revenue. There's a corresponding revenue estimate that goes with this. The hotel motel tax is just a flow-through. None of that goes to us. Whatever is collected is dispersed between the CVB and the Coliseum Authority and the Coliseum Authority keeps theirs once we pay off the bonded debt that exists. So you will see a corresponding revenue item in Fund 296 that reflects the expected collection of hotel motel taxes. So whatever is collected is then dispersed. These two items match 100%.
So basically, you're saying an increase in revenue is the reason there's an increase in expenditures.
Sure. Yeah, anything that comes in, we have to reflect the dispersal.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm
Question following the same line that the Commissioner from the 7th posed. What is the remaining bonded indebtedness at the Coliseum?
I'll get that for you.
Commissioner from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to address about the grant writer. The grant writer, is there any way you can go through the departments who normally get grants for the last 3 years, just send out a memo to all the departments, because you don't want for the grant writer, all of a sudden everybody sits back and the grant writer take all the responsibility. All of this, I should look at, should be in addition to what we previously been getting over the last 3 years. So I think that's important. And the reason I make that observation here is because every time we begin to, someone looks to get impressed, we duplicate services, one party stop doing business, another party takes it up. Then after a while, and that party stop doing business who was doing it, then the other party takes it up, and then many times nobody does anything waiting on the other. So we want to make sure the grant write-up is an enhancement to potential grants that we receive. And the only way you're going to know that is to have a record of last 3 years of what that looks like in terms of what the grants. So you'll know what to expect of them. That's one thing. The next thing, when you talk about, I'm going back to Mark Academy at Diamond Lakes. That should have already been in the Recreation Department's budget because I think we put it in there last year, I believe. And so I don't know how you oversight that. So I'm saying that, and you may have already addressed this, Madam Administrator, and that is that shouldn't be another additional $150,000.
So for FY22, Mock Academy was funded through ARP, and Parks and Recreation did not include it in their original budget submission, which is why they sent over a amendment asking for it to be included.
Is that the first time they got the $150,000? No, that's the smaller. That's the smaller one. We're talking about the expansion.
$150,000, yes.
So they didn't get it in 21?
21, they got 70 from the general fund, which is on your appropriation sheet.
Right, I understand that
I'm
one.
not sure if, I know the 70 was, I don't know if there was a separate disbursement made from another funding source. But
Okay, I'm just saying, so, yeah, because what that 150 is about, it was the expanding to Diamond Lakes. And so if that has been the last 2 years, if it's been the last 2 years, then it should have been in 21. But if it's just been last year when they expanded, then I understand it. But so just look at that. If they got it in 21, it should have been in the budget again. The cyber parking deck. I was on, now I may be misreading it, so please, for clarification, I can stand a correction. On the cyber parking deck, if I'm not mistaken, we negotiated with Augusta University or the state that they would take care of all the maintenance of that and what have you. So my question is, what are we funding the cyber deck for?
Sir, they take care of, they do the actual work, but we pay for it. That is for management fees.
Oh, we pay for it though?
We pay for it. We record the expenses. We record the revenue.
Okay, well, they got us on that.
They cut the check. We they collect the revenue for us. They pay the expenses for us. They send us a check at the end of the year. We need to record the gross revenues and the gross expenses.
Okay, all right. So it's to a benefit for us. I mean, that's what I thought we did, that
Yes.
they would take care of the expenses
Yes,
of
sir.
that, and we wouldn't.
It's-
Okay,
It's the operating agreement. The revenues also pay for part of the debt service and
Yes,
the
sir.
parking decks.
okay, all right. And Mr. Mayor, to my colleagues, Mr. Mayor, I'm sure you already know this, so I'll just mention for the record. On December 31 is when we begin to look at that parking deck, that depot in its fullness, because by that time, they're supposed to have those 700 jobs or whatever jobs they were supposed to have. And if they didn't, then they're in default. And what the contract says, I'm not aware of what it says, but there can be some adjustments over in terms of the utilization, how they use their property over there. But it has to be by December 31. Whatever their threshold was of employees, then that comes into question on December 31. Want to say the cemetery, but I think it gets so convoluted, so I'm going to leave it alone. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Commissioner from the 8th.
I'm just going to circle back around to the grant writer and the administrator office request. Currently, how many departments write their own grants?
If a grant is to be written, all of them would have to write a grant if they are submitting an application.
And if there was a grant writer in the administrator's office, would the departments not already have to write most of the grant anyway, because they are the subject matter experts?
No, but they would have to work with the grant writer to ensure that the details are there and that the ask is complete. As a certified grant writer, the writing portion of the grant and being the subject matter expert within the department is a effort in which someone has to lead it. So for instance, right now, if the Central Services Department wanted to write a historical grant for Ezekiel Harris House renovations, then someone from the Historical Society or someone within Ezekiel Harris House would have to assist that grant writer to ensure the details are there. But the actual application and the writing portion, the document itself, would be done by the grant writer, as well as following it through to ensure that the funding is received and that the grant is administered appropriately.
Have we ever considered contracting with some grant writers to, try to make this a little more efficient instead of hiring a full-time person?
We have, and in the interim, because we don't have one on staff today, that's exactly what we've done. At the same time, their efforts are not, Augusta is not their priority. Because they're a consultant, they have to write grants for others as well. So them being able to make Augusta their primary focus, that's not how they're designed.
I'll lean into it and help you with that.
Understood.
What she's referring to is the CSRA Regional Commission. They offer grant services. There's a fee associated with that, but they're working with all of the other counties that are part of the CSRA.
That's kind of where I was headed to. But there's also private entities that do grant writing around as well, and I was just curious to see if we had thought about contracting that way as well.
We have and we do. We currently do.
It doesn't negate the fact that the city of Augusta needs its own grant writer. This is a drop in the bucket. I haven't done the math on it. I'm a little slow this morning, but I know it's less than probably 1/100% of the overall budget of the city. All right, Commissioner Mason, you waived. All right, Chair recognizes Commissioner from the 5th, the Mayor Pro Tem.
Good morning, good morning. I'm gonna go way off script with this, and this is just something that I'm gonna throw out to you guys. As you know, every quarter I put on a breakfast over at Brigham, and just can't tell you how much money we spend on that, as well as other expenses that we have. I'm just sitting here brainstorming, and this is just throw out at you guys. What if each commissioner had $5,000 to maybe put on meetings and or, I don't know, neat paperwork or what have you? That wouldn't be money to himself. That would be money that's, I guess, with the administrator's office that you could apply for or what have you. So, I mean, is that a thought? Anybody got any thoughts on that? So that would add up to about $50,000, $5,000 for each of us to do meetings and or other things. If you're doing meetings like you should, it'll probably go further than $5,000. Anybody?
All right, Chair recognizes the commissioner from the 3rd.
We already have a problem when we take these trips that we go to out of town, and we got taxpayers that are frustrated about that. So trying to do get money to do meetings with each district is going to be. I appreciate what you brought up, Mayor Pro Tem, but I can't go there on that one. Sorry.
And this will be the last thing that I say. You can't be scared to step out there. People are going to criticize everything that you do. It doesn't matter if you're doing something that's really great for the city or if you're doing, I don't know, what people see as something that's not so good. You're going to get criticized for it. As a commissioner, I feel like I should do what I need to do. And sometimes, as they say, you and the Lord are a majority, which means a lot of times you're going to have quite a few people against you, but at the same time, you may be right. So I'll leave that with you to think about it, but I know of other municipalities where they have clerks that work for each of the commissioners. They have, I think there's one place up near Atlanta where they've got like $10,000 where they can spend monies on different things that they do with their office. So just because we don't do it in Augusta right now doesn't mean that it's not the right thing to do. And when you think about it, as a commissioner, when you get elected, that's basically all that you get with the little bit of salary that you receive. We need to make sure that we do what it takes to get the job done, and sometimes you have to go a little bit further than what they give you. Meaning that sometimes you may have to take it out of your pocket if you don't have it, which means that you have to be dedicated to your office to get it done. It's just something I threw out at you. That may be something that we want to consider in the future, but I think it's the right time to talk about it. If you don't want 5,000, that's fine. I'll continue to do what I do. Some of you don't have meetings anyway, and that's not throwing something out at you. I said that to say that you need to do more for your communities and partaking and getting the message out to your community. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Chair recognizes the commissioner from the 7th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll follow up. So, again, yes, I hosted breakfasts when I started, but I realized it wasn't effective because of social media, frankly, and HOAs. But I do agree with the aspect of could commissioners be reimbursed for expenses, but I don't think it ought to be budgeted to us individually because most of these facilities we're not paying for when we use the facilities. But you know, if you're buying breakfast and things of that nature, I'm willing to have that discussion to the clerks, under the clerk's office, because I do think there's certain things that commissioners do that we reimbursement wouldn't be a bad thing for a breakfast or something. I know some of the individuals up here do breakfast, and some of them just don't. But also, when you look at like the clerk's budget, I mean, we've gone from $295,000 to $441,000 in 3 years, and we hadn't increased staff. We've increased travel, and I'm just wondering if we can't have a conversation with Ms. Bonner of kind of seeing if that can be fit within the budget, because that we've increased pretty significantly in the clerk's office in 3 years, and maybe there's an opportunity there for an expense reimbursal for something that commission spends than when they are servicing the constituent. So I definitely think it's worthy of a conversation. But as far as like allocating each commissioner $5,000 or something like that, I would not support something like that. I think it's more because not all of us do it, and I don't know that 5,000 is right for one person, might not be right for the other. But maybe it's a certain allocated amount that we can find within the clerk's budget. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Commissioner from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. While we're off script here, let's continue the conversation a little bit. One of the things to think about as far as this commission is concerned, and when we put ourselves up to the public to be in these positions, one of the things we got to realize, number one, there is no office to operate from, okay? It's your house, your car, or wherever it is that you are. I get people all the time tell me, I'll meet you at your office. Well, that's not going to work because I don't have an office. And they're really kind of surprised to hear that. But that's one of the things that we deal with. And then we talked about the criticism. Well, we get criticized for using a cell phone, but I mean, if I don't have an office for you to come talk to me in person, how are you going to talk to me? I mean, if I don't have a cell phone, and then we say, well, you're getting these iPads and things like this, well, how am I going to get my emails and stuff and that sort of thing? So there's this thought process that the commission, somehow we're making a lot of money and we have all these things, but we kind of know this coming in, so that's important to note. And if you don't know it, Commissioner-elect Lewis, you're going to be operating from your home, you're going to be operating from your car or anywhere else, and you're going to get criticized for using a phone. You're going to get criticized for going and trying to get some professional development so that you can do the job to the best of your ability, and that all comes with it. I don't have to tell the mayor the criticism that comes from going to these various events here, there, internationally, whatever the case may be. But I don't understand how you expect for us to get better prepared to do a job that doesn't require you to do anything but be 2 years in the state and 1 year in your district, pay a couple of $100, and you can sit in the seat. You don't even have to be a high school graduate. Now, if you expect that someone can come up here and be fully prepared to do the job without getting professional development and those sort of things, then I would offer that position to anyone who wants to run for it and kind of see what happens with you. Now, on the other hand, as we deal with these breakfasts, I did it for 7 years monthly, and it does get costly. There's no doubt about that. But one of the things that I realize is that all communities are not created equal. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. It's just in terms of information flow and the need for information and how you receive information. And that's just a fact. And it's not criticizing any one person or another, but all communities, all districts are not created equal and do not need the exact same thing. So as one who did it for 7 years, I certainly understand the costs that are associated with it. For the most part, it came out of my pocket. Every now and then there would be some community initiatives that would come from sponsors or contract vendors that have been with the city, and they'll do their community initiative type thing. But these are decisions that we make as commissioners in terms of, our communities and what our community need from us and how do we communicate with our community. So I just want to say that, especially while we have the commissioner-elect in the room here, that if there's an expectation that there's an office for you to work from, that ain't happening. Lots of meetings and all of this, and the pay is minuscule in comparison to the work that you'll actually do. But at the same time, understand that this is selfless service that you're giving to this community, and there's options in terms of whether you want to be in this position or whether you don't. So all I'll say is let's look at that holistically from a commission standpoint, because there's other areas and other entities that do have offices that do have these types of things that you're talking about, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. We just don't happen to have it. We have such a critical media that we get caught up in that. But last thing I'll say about that, if you know who you are, and Mr. Mayor, if you know whose you are, you're not going to let that affect you too much. You're going to have to continue to do your job because you don't do this job for thanks. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the time.
In the words of Slim Shady, I'm not afraid to take a stand. Everybody come and take my hand, and we'll walk through this storm together. Slim Shady. Recognizes the commissioner from the 7th.
Back to regularly scheduled programming. So where we're at right now, I mean, let's just talk about the budget. Like for me, I would like to see administrator go back to the department heads where there's significant increases, salary increases, see if there's program increases, and see if we can find money. I mean, we've talked about a few things that we think we possibly don't need. But I don't know that waiting till the second quarter is gonna fly for me. I also feel like if we can't get to some of these areas, I mean, the public defender, the mock academy, I understand it was in there before. The library, you know, maybe we don't give them 100, we give them 50. Serenity, I think that one is pretty vital, frankly, in this community. And I think Jared, DA went down, State Court, Kelly's, she's where she needs to be. I mean, like, based on what these recommendations are, I would just hope that, like, there could be a deeper conversation with each one of these directors that have a significant increase in their 23 budget to see if they're asking for 10, can they only have 9? And, you know, I'm just using that as an example because based on the conversation that we had, I mean, we already found like $100 and something thousand, $200,000, and we need 382. I mean, I just think that creates a better solution for me than deferring to the second quarter because of the needs and whatnot, and as well as next year's budget. I mean, when we look at next year's budget and see the increase, we're gonna go, what? Oh wait, we deferred, and that's the reason, and it just makes it holistically, and I think it lessens the blow for next year's discussion if we have the tougher discussions now. So,
Madam Administrator, I'm going to ask you to do the following, and let me back up and start with this. So this is our third work session, right? Our third work session, and on the basis of that, we have some amendments that were presented to us today on the basis of our second work session's discussions and the resulting conversations that have led to a series of amendments. Those amendments bring us to what is effectively $382,000 of proposed funding enhancements. I have not heard from anyone on this body that they're opposed to those in practice. But what I have heard, so as it stands today, we're at the place of the $382,000 proposed funding enhancements as presented. What I'm hearing in addition to that is there's a ongoing request to take another look at finding Ms. Dowse an additional series of potentially $300,000 in cuts. I think that's what I heard. And if you can find an additional which ultimately results in a net zero, what I think I'm hearing. And if you can find that and bring that back to us, that would be helpful. In addition to the questions that have already been posed to you and staff with regards to the FTEs around right-of-way maintenance and cemetery maintenance and those things. I'm gonna leave open Wednesday at 10 a.m. Okay, Wednesday at 10 a.m. for another discussion in the event that we don't resolve some of these things on paper. So Wednesday at 10 a.m., I'm going to reserve that for additional work session, okay?
Mayor Davis, can I speak to Commissioner Frantum's comments surrounding the department director conversations?
Sure.
Commissioner, we've had those conversations, and please note that the proposed budget in front of you is pared down from what the departments have requested initially. Many of them came in requesting a lot, and because funding could not sustain their requests and because the need was not adequately justified, it did not make it to the proposed budget that you see in front of you today. But in light of what Mayor Davis has just directed, we will go back and further scrub what we have already proposed to you.
All right, Chair recognizes the commissioner from the mayoral team.
Thank you, sir. Madam Administrator, tell me, what is the advantage of doing some of your proposed items in April as opposed to starting them in the first quarter?
So the chances of a department being able to hire an employee January 1 is slim to none, because the position would have to go through our compensation department with human resources. The job description would have to be developed if it needs additional changes. And so April 1 was, one, an opportunity for us to find the additional funding needed to meet the amendments that have been requested. But two, just take a look at the timeline in which it takes for us to onboard employees. That is not to say that the departments can't start in January working with human resources on getting the job description ready, ensuring that compensation is aware and knowing what the hire date is. But April 1 was a time frame that would not put the departments in a hardship.
I mean, could you move it up to March 1? You think that would be okay?
Sure.
I mean, I'm trying to work with you a little bit.
Sure.
Because we got some folks who believe you should hire them right out the box. I understand what you're saying. April 1, if that's what you have to do, that's what you have to do. But I'm just saying, if you could move it up a month or so, or whenever you're ready, then that might help us out a little bit.
Sure. If this body is amenable to March 1 versus April 1, that will definitely help. And then we will look throughout the remainder of the budget for the additional funds and propose some changes to the funding plan.
I got you. Moving on. This budget does not include a possible 1.6 million to Gold Cross, does it?
It does not.
Okay, so if you put that in there, then that's going to reshape everything that we have, pretty much. I think we may have some funding from ARP left for that.
That's correct.
But
$650,000.
650 is not 1 million.
That's what's being funded. Excuse me. Yes.
650,000
Yes.
currently, but I thought there was like 1 point something in ARP.
1.3.
He said,
But you got-
and Hassan probably knows. He
You
probably
got
been
650
all
for
over.
this year, and you got 650 for 23. You got 1.3.
Okay, so you would have a little bit of money, but after that, then we have to pick that up out of our budget, pretty much.
Yes.
Okay, moving on. And I'm just going to say it. I was the one who was saying that we should have adopted the proposed tax rate as opposed to rolling it back, because Ms. Williams has told us, so many times that we're not going to have the money that we need in order to do what we need to do, and then we're going to have to look for some money and or hope that we get some extra money from tax people and the money rolling in or what have you. And I'm not going to put you on the spot to speak about the tax rate or what have you, but I just wanted to say that due to the fact that we're trying to please two gods. We're trying to make sure people have what they want, and at the same time, we're trying not to tax them any money. We're not trying not to ask them for any money, and yet at the same time, we sit here and we struggle to give the DA and other folks what they need in order to, make this a viable community when it comes to monies. We've got so much out there. We've got so much with the blight, the maintenance, the cemeteries, and what have you. They look terrible. As much as they cut, you get rain, and then it grows like weeds do. I won't say much more, but at the same time, I think we're in a situation where you can't really do everything that's right. Nothing you do will be wrong. Yeah, I guess you just need to present the budget. And at the same time, as we ask questions, it seems like we get one commissioner, they kick the can over to the left, and then you get another commissioner, he kicks the can over to the right, and we're pretty much back at what you said in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Commissioner from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, let's speak to Madam Administrator. Talk to me again about those vacancies we have.
Is it anything in particular?
How many it was, and I know you ruled out they were in the sheriff's office, I'm saying. So where are those vacancies?
116 that are
Plus
in the general
plus
fund.
41?
And the sheriff's agency has 130 plus vacancies.
Yeah, I don't think they were counting those in the vacancies.
They were not.
Yeah, that's my point.
Yeah, the 116 in general fund.
Yeah.
So total, as of September 14th, vacancies of record, we recorded 621, but general fund vacancies totaled 170. 116 of those have been vacant for less than 1 year, whereas 41 of those have been vacant between 1 and 2 years, 1.99.
Okay, so now, let me go back at it. When you do the 600 number, that's the sheriff's office is in that, right?
Yes.
Okay, so take that out.
Yes.
And so everything else belongs where? Throughout the government from there?
General fund only.
General fund only?
The 170 positions that I just gave is general fund only.
I didn't say that now. Y'all looking at me, I didn't say that.
That math doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so now,
Hear that, Commissioner?
so my question is, setting the sheriff aside, I find it hard to believe that for the debt that you're looking at, that we can't. Now, if you need to send us where all those positions are, and we get together and decide where we cut those positions at, and to make up these shortfalls, we need to do that. Just send us with every department, other than the sheriff department, that has positions vacant, and let us get together and decide what we need, what positions we'll cut. I don't know, I ain't getting no amen, so I guess my colleague may not agree.
Amen.
Not gonna get an amen because we ain't in church.
Good question. Good point, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so
Far from it.
that's number one. I'm gonna go back to something. There are a number of people, and you still have the floor.
Thank you.
You still have the floor, but I'm gonna go back to something, and I'm gonna sound like the broken record. Government is about service delivery at its level best. How do we do that efficiently and effectively and deliver on the basic services? What's happening right now, and it's not a new thing, is we're trying to do sense budgeting. How do I feel? What does it smell like? What does it look like? We can't do that. We got a level set on basic service delivery. I want to deliver water. I want to pick up trash. I want to keep the lights on. I want to cut the grass. And I want to make sure the bills get paid and that we collect taxes. Let's start there.
Yeah, and Mr. Mayor, I couldn't agree more in terms of what you're saying, but I do believe, we may be talking about 15 or 20 of those positions to get to where we need to be. I think we've been here 8 years now, and we've done a good job in providing exactly what you just said. But to the degree to have those kinds of positions open, and we historically had that many positions open, matter of fact, it may have grown, but we're still at the same level of quality service. And I think it's really more about organization of where we sit more than anything else. Because when we talk about demolitions of homes, we're going to end up finding 2 departments that demo based on certain criteria. When we talk about cutting grass, we're going to find potentially 2 to 3 departments within this government that does that based on how tall the grass is. You know, now we're talking about, and we're going to do it again when we're talking about the bridge. I mean, the 5th Street Bridge. Because now we're saying, well, the Recreation Department will be working in conjunction with the DDA. So we're about to create the same thing again. Who's really in charge of it?
All right.
So all these things need to be streamlined, and when you streamline it, you probably will find a lot of waste in it. And that's all I'm saying.
Well, we agree on that, and that was the conversation last week about there needs to be a deep dive into organizational management. We're not prepared to have that conversation today. And so your focus is, how do I fund the services that we're trying to deliver now? The challenge is, when it comes to positions, whether they've been vacant for 18 months or whether they've been vacant for 24 months, is you're just coming through what they call the great quitting. And people are transitioning, saying, well, I appreciate what y'all did for me, but you know what? I'm going to go do something different. And so you now have vacancies that you didn't have before, because people say, I want to go do something different. And for you now to make a unilateral decision, well, I'm just going to cut them, that's not prudent. It is absolutely not prudent, because you want to be able to employ people so that you can be at a basic level of service delivery, and as you become more efficient and effective, you can increase that. But you got to put all of these factors into the pot of stew that you're making in order to get something that generally tastes good. But all of these things are driving the fact that you got more vacancies than you've had. You got a global pandemic. We've had the confluence of 3 things at one time in our generation, where historically they happen in a single time. And it's only one thing. We've had 3 things that have happened in this short period of time, and now you're trying to manage that and deal with all of those things. And we've done a really good job of that. But don't lose sight of the fact that you got people who have left. Yeah, some went for what they perceive to be better opportunities. You can't besmirch that. We all do. But if you cut those positions, they're going to have to come back to this body, and they're going to have to start from, well, you can only hire them at this salary because the commission's rule is, well, you got to start at entry level. And then they're going to come back 4 months later and say, well, in order for me to hire the person that I want to hire, I need to be 17% above your entry level. Let's not do that. Let's not do that.
Mr. Mayor, can I respond?
No, sir.
Okay.
Chair goes to the commissioner from the 4th.
All righty then. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's a lot to unpack here. You've got needs, you have wants. You talk about basic services that we can provide. We talk about not raising taxes. We've talked about a number of different things. What we have yet to talk about, or anything presented even close to, is any potential cuts, which are an inherent part when you look at a budget. Generally speaking, you're going to have some options presented to you, and we have had an option presented to us, but generally speaking, you have several courses of action which would allow us to be more thoughtful, if you will, in our process as we're trying to figure out, what is it that we need to do. I'm of the opinion that we don't necessarily have to always throw money at an issue when the services rendered does not seem to change historically over the years. And so that's something that I'm struggling with even now at this point. So I'm wondering, have we had a discussion about a cut across the board so that we can meet just the, as the mayor said, the basic services and needs of our city. We told our constituents that we did not want, as a whole, did not want to do a property tax increase, which in fact there was actually one anyway due to the evaluations. But at the end of the day, we would also have to go out and say, hey, look, because you didn't get that, we didn't get that tax increase, we can do services at this level. And so there's a pattern, a logical pattern that goes along with the decisions that we make if we continue to make decisions in that manner. So my question then is, in terms of cuts, what discussions, if any, have we had in terms of cutting certain things in the budget so that we can meet or have a budget that we can propose and potentially pass?
Commissioner from the 4th.
Yes, sir.
The commissioner from the 6th is going to appreciate my next comment. It'll make him sound like a sage. But what he said a moment ago is the outflow or the overflow of what you're trying to get at. You've now got multiple departments doing blight remediation and management. This body voted for that. You didn't have to, but you did. It wasn't, again, as the commissioner from the 6th said, and we say, well, is it duplication of services? What it really is trying to decide where best do we take existing dollars and do the right work. And now for us to be at the place of saying, well, let's just go back and make unilateral cuts. You'd have no basis for that, because now you're telling me to go cut and come back to me with a number, but you haven't given me a number of what you want to achieve. The question is, in a $1.09 billion budget, and George, unfortunately, it's not the $2 billion ticket tonight, but what it is you're saying, I want you to just take a number and I want you to cut it. And the question then becomes, how does everybody up here feel about it? Because you haven't given me any data to substantiate, where do you want me to cut? Why do you want me to cut? How much? I mean, there's only so much blood in the human body. And so to that end, if I just start cutting, the question becomes where, how much, and why? Now, the commissioner from the 7th started down that path and gave effectively about $300,000+ worth of potential cuts. And the question then is that enough? And if so, why? Is it because we're trying to net zero the 382 of proposed funding? Or is it because we just want to feel good about a number? And the facts are, the digest in Augusta has grown. As a result of that, you got more money coming in. Yes, that's true. And not only did the digest grow, but it grew across the country to the tune of roughly about 16%. What you're now seeing is a resetting taking place. And you guys and ladies will have to deal with that next year. You will. And so as you're thinking through what's taking place between now and 15 November, the question that is in front of you, in my mind, is how do we prepare post-CARES Act funding, ARP funding? How do we make sure that we're still able to deliver services and not have one-offs with this group wants to do blight and become a developer, that group wants to be a developer. Then I got 25 people say, well, how many trees you gonna cut? So I pose that to you, Commissioner, from the 4th. If you have a number, and I'm certainly prepared to entertain a number, but it needs to tell me how, why, and where.
Well, that's a great speech, Mr. Mayor, but I'm going to fundamentally disagree with you on a number of counts, and too many to really go down that path right now. But specifically, what I mentioned here, and in my experience, maybe it's a little bit different in federal government, but 35 years worth, when we're doing budget analysis or comparisons, or even requests, there are a number of courses of action that's going to come before us. And it's not for me to tell those individuals that I pay $150,000, $200,000 a year to do what they do. It's for that to bring to me, and then with those courses of action, so as the executive, I can help make a good educated decision. Now, here's the deal. If I've got to do their job, then I wouldn't need them. And so what I would like to see, and certainly futuristically, when we come down to the time frame of budgeting and budget requests, there ought to be several courses of action that are placed on the table for us to take into consideration. If in fact, from a military standpoint, if I only have one course of action and that course of action does not work, I'm coming home in a body bag. Now, you say this isn't the military, but this is how serious I take it. Because you're dealing with taxpayers' funds. And so if I've got multiple methods of getting us to that point to choose from that you'll bring to me, based on those things that you're dealing with in your departments and as administrator throughout the year, you can clearly see yourself. I'm not in those departments throughout the year. It's not for me to say, hey, take this, or take that. Those departments are dealing with that. That's what we pay them for. And in my opinion, that is what should be collaborated on and then brought forth to us as executives of this body, and then to make a decision from there. So although much of what you said has merit, but it's not, from my opinion, it's not for me to say, hey, take this, take that. At the end of the day, I'll make a decision on that. You bring me and say, hey, it's my recommendation that we take this, and this based on, and show me the justification for that. I can make an intelligent decision. So that's just one person's opinion. It's my opinion on how best to move forward. We'll pass a budget. We always do. Somewhere along the line next year, we'll fix it. And that's pretty much how that'll go, because a budget is not final by any stretch of the imagination. And so we'll pass a budget. No question about it. There's no doubt in my mind that we will, or whether we won't. But these discussions are absolutely necessary as we continue to move forward. And it also kind of sets the stage of priorities moving forward for years to come, of what to expect or what not to expect as we move into the next administration. So that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Chair recognizes Commissioner from the 8th.
Thanks, sir. This entire conversation today has been surrounded by $382,000 that we need to help fund some of these additional items that are needs, especially within our public defenders and our DA. And when you look at the grand scheme of things, we've had the discussion about asking departments for cuts. We've asked, where can we find the additional funding to help make sure that we can allocate these funds into those areas where they're really needed. And so when you take a look at it, we're talking about less than 1% of the general fund. It's 0.2% of the general fund is what is needed to be cut across the board in order for this to make it, really to give us all an easy decision to make. Or even if you want to go farther, it's 0.03% of the entire budget that we have to find in order to fund this $382,000. So is it such a big ask to ask our departments? I know you said you've gone to them and, their original recommendations or suggestions, you cut those back. We're not talking about a great deal of money here, but I think that as we're looking at this and looking at ways to make sure that the funding is there, 0.2%. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, Chair recognizes Commissioner from the 7th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question for the administrator. Can I?
Please.
Okay. Madam Administrator, based on what's been discussed up here today and Commissioner Hassan mentioned the positions. This is just my thoughts, is like, could this stuff be ready for tomorrow for like finance committee add-on on the agenda tomorrow? Is that possible? And the reason I say that is because like, I think that we have to, as commissioners, take the information and like talk amongst ourselves, as Commissioner Hassan mentioned. So I don't know that another work session is worth doing if we can get the information, get the presentation, and then talk about it, and then come back the following Tuesday on the budget side.
So to be clear, are you asking the questions that you've asked that we've denoted, are you asking if that information can be ready for you by tomorrow?
Yes, and finance committee.
Some of it, I definitely think so. All of it, I mean, we could make every effort to get you as much of it as possible. But
Okay.
let me make sure I'm clear. So the funding plan that we recommended, you do not want to move those positions out to April 1. Is March 1 an option, or do you want the funding to start in January?
I mean, they're not. The thing is like you're right. I mean, it's going to be very hard to hire someone in January. We understand that, but like if the funds are there, like March, I guess I don't have a problem with that. That's just me personally. I mean, I just think that we need to get these positions moving faster than later, whatever that looks like.
And no, so that's fine. I just want to make sure we're clear. And then Commissioner Franklin, you mentioned earlier $50,000 or $100,000 for the library. What's the number?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm speaking for myself. I just think that we've given them 200. If we can't find that 50, at least I'm gonna ask you to, I guess, bring back options too. Whether you think you can make it happen.
Because I did. That's exactly what I did today. In the funding plan.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go to what the mayor said. He talked about a holistic approach. He talked about the future, and I'm gonna talk about a couple things that rate down the pipeline. In our 23 budget, what percentage or amount is going towards the reserve fund? What is that total in the 23 budget?
We have budgeted an addition of $1 million to increase the reserve.
And that's basically sales tax revenue at the end of the year? Is that what that I mean, that's where you're...
Combination of everything. It's simply put, it's the difference between revenue and expenditures.
Okay. And I mean, as I stated before, like, I mean, we're pretty positive that we're going to be on a surplus from a sales tax revenue at the end of the year based on projections of where we're at, correct?
Correct. For 20.
Yeah. And I know I'm going to throw this out there because I think the ones of us that are coming back next year, we've got Gold Cross. There's going to be a discussion about it. We know, $1.6 million and $1 million or $1.1 million, whatever was on the table. So even at $650,000, that means that's $350,000 that we're going to need for next year's budget. We talked about fire trucks, and again, money we're going to need. There's been discussions about a possible looking at a CFO in the future. Like, these are discussions that like we really need a contingency amount to be able to allocate the resources. That's why typically when we have a budget, do we not have like a designated amount the commission basically had, like 500, 600, 700,000? Has that been typical, but now we can't do that because of funds?
Sir, you've got a contingency of $1.5 million in this budget.
Okay. All right. So there we go with, I mean, you're talking, I mean, we could go down to $1.2 million and we reach where we need to go. So, I mean, I guess we haven't heard that since I've been up here. I didn't know that there was 1.5. It's normally less than that, I think.
No, sir. This year, I believe it was $1.2 million or $1.3 million. We typically target that amount. Lots of times during our budget discussions, that amount gets reduced. Couple of bad actions, a couple of settlements, and that you'd be surprised how quickly that contingency gets used.
Okay. Well, for me, like when I look at like things in the future, $600,000, $700,000, I mean, 800, $1 million, like that's going to go pretty quick, and things that we're going to need moving into the next year's budget that we're not even talking about today. So that's kind of where I'm at, Mayor, about what we need on top of it. I didn't even realize we had this 1.5, which is kind of a little bit of a game changer. So thank you.
Well, yeah, we always start there. That's been consistent across the board.
I believe in.
I'm going to keep Wednesday open.
Yeah,
I'm going to keep Wednesday open. Okay?
yeah, that was,
At 10 a.m.
yeah.
We're going to keep Wednesday open, and we'll give staff an opportunity to put this information together. And I'm going to ask every member of this body to take your notebooks and go through them for these things: contingency, reserves, and understanding what the expenditures are. And if you all can get that information that we've asked for as quickly as possible. If there are no, okay, the Mayor Pro Tem's got his hand up.
No,
Mayor Pro
I was
Tem.
just gonna say, we don't need to do this tomorrow. I
Yeah.
was gonna ask for Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday at
Because
10.
this could potentially get lengthy, and I don't wanna be here tomorrow any more than 2-3 hours. I'm just telling you. Well, I got cats on the porch.
All right.
So.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned.